I'd like to call to order the December 11th meeting of Town Council, Washington, Virginia. The first item on the agenda, let me rephrase that. If my colleagues would allow it and approve of it, I'd like to move the appointment of council member, which is scheduled on old business, to first thing. Peggy Ralph is here to swear in and let's be done with it, and you can go home. And I hate to lose 25% of our audience. As everybody knows, Gary H. will step down. Gary did an incredible job. Will be missed, is missed. But we are extremely fortunate to have a gentleman who has raised his hand, and it seemed quite willing, it wasn't forced, in case anybody else, to be on the council. And then it's Fred Kaplan, and everybody knows Fred, but just for the record, lives here in town on Mount Salem Street. He's a career educator / fundraiser in his earlier days. Spent a lot of time in Charlottesville with his family. Runs 3 Montessori schools here in, really, I guess, Culpeper, really, on Route 29. Closer to home, he's the executive director of CCLC. And then not the least of it, he has been chairman of the Planning Commission for several years, and as everybody knows, Planning Commission came out with a really first-rate comprehensive plan. And working very well with Brad and Alan, who's here, and others on that commission. Produced, I think, a document which we're all very, very proud. So I can't think of anybody who would be a better addition to the council, and as such I would move to nominate him to join the council, to fill the seat of Gary H.
I'll second that.
You'll second that. And John, at this point I ask if there are any other nominations, or do we vote? We ask, are there any other nominations? Hearing none, and we have a first and a second. Let's have a roll call vote. Let's start with, to my right?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And Peggy, you'd be so kind to swear Fred in, and then he can actually come up here and participate in this meeting.
Come. I'll let you face it.
If you want to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge all the duties incumbent upon you as member of the Town Council for the Town of Washington, Virginia, so help you God.
Thank you very much.
And if you'll sign your name right away, if you're a fan.
It's the morning better have.
Right, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Anytime.
Brett, if you'd be so kind to, I guess you get to take each seat. Now the captain seat. Well, great, it really, I won't repeat myself too much, but I'm really, really, really pleased that Frank able to join us on this board. It's going to be a great addition. Brad?
With the appointment of Fred Kaplan to town council, it puts 2 of us in the planning commission on the council, which is not allowed. So I will step down from the planning commission, effective as today or tonight. And I will leave as the head of the commission.
That's great. gracious and good of you. You can also go to a few less meetings.
Yeah,
Thank
spend more time at waste plant.
We do have,
Yeah.
yes, it's freed up time for Brad to help out even more on the water systems that we need.
I'm not going to have another chance to thank Brad for all the work he did. And he did a lot of work with the comprehensive plan, help write sections, keep us on. So first, I want to thank you very much for all your work.
You're welcome.
All right, well, let's get started. Jerry Goebel is working tonight, driving a school bus somewhere, and is not here. Otherwise, we now have 6 members. Treasurer's report. I guess I'm doing that. Oh, sorry, minutes. Draft meetings of September 11th. Meeting. Anybody have questions, observations?
I just have one thing on the last page, or something. The top of the last page, council agreed by consensus to hold the town. I think we just have to add Christmas Day. Yes, that's what that was. Okay, sorry. And then the other, there are just a couple things that they're really clean. A couple of little typos. So I make a motion to approve, if nobody else has anything.
I'll second. All in favor? All right, I will do the treasurer's report. A terrific month of November, meals and lodging, $42,891. Wastewater income, $8,300, rounded. And, I'm sorry, water income, $8,300, rounded. And the wastewater income was $13,500, rounded. Total consolidated assets of $512,000, which was in the bank. Water usage gallons, pumps 918,000, backwash 27,000, billable gallons 892,000, gallons billed 627.6 thousand, non-metered sales 20,000 is around number, and gallons treated but not billable 244,000 gallons. On the bills to be paid, several things to note. On the second sheet, there's a payment to Mitzi Young, capital expense of $5,395.06. As some of you know, or all of you know, Mitzi and her husband essentially provided a mortgage, or secondary mortgage, I'm not sure, on the purchase of this building by the town back many years ago. And we've been paying that mortgage off. And it was decided by both Mitzi's family and ourselves, the town, that it made sense to pay that off and get it off our books and get it off Mitzi's family. So that's what that is about. There's a payment of $8,000 to fire truck fund. That is the town's voluntary, you can't spell it like that word, but voluntary contribution to the Washington Fire and Rescue Squad. So as a touch of confusion, there's also in the budget, we get $8,000 of a grant from somebody, which gets passed on through the town to the Washington Fire and Rescue Squad. This is the one where it's actually contribution by the town to those folks. And I think that is it in terms of unusual. Any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor?
You reverse my name.
Planning Commission,
Planning Commission really has two things to report. Number one, that the Planning Commission has met and is beginning to, the task of aligning or making recommendations to the town council of alignments of the zoning ordinances to meet the new comprehensive plan. That will be the task that the Planning Commission will be taking up over the course of the next few months. The second part of it is that the Planning Commission has an opening and seeks anyone who's interested in being on the Planning Commission to fill the position, but not the shoes of Brad.
So,
we should advertise that, should we not? And send out to the town.
Be a legal ad.
I'll put it in the meeting.
And it's meeting notices. And let's also send something out to the electronic email list of folks interested in town.
Okay, do you want letters of interest for the next council meeting, or you just want to leave it open-ended until you get one?
I'd be inclined to say by the Friday
Before?
prior to the next meeting, which, next meeting is January 8th, so without subtracting whatever the number
It's
is.
like January 5th.
I would encourage everybody here and the audience to think of, suggest people, talk to people. It's a very key role, and it's a great way of getting people involved in government and with some responsibility. And it's a very good planning commission, and I think we should not only keep it the standard, but have it improved if possible. ARB, there's a meeting next Wednesday, a week from this Wednesday, to review a proposal for a shed of some sort on the Hot Creek property, so they'll be looking at that. Let me make just, I'd like to talk a little bit, a few comments on various things. One, I thought yesterday's Christmas parade was smashing, and everybody I've run into, during the day, after the parade, today, whatever, it just, I don't know how you measure these things, but to me it was probably the best ever. I want to thank in particular Judy Desaro, chairman of the operation. Tom Pelican was largely responsible for the parade itself. Kim Nelson was largely responsible for Artisans Market. And then I'm not going to list everybody else, but there's a core committee of maybe 10 people, and then there were in turn probably another 30 people or some such number that really did a lot of work. And it's the kind of thing that nobody appreciates how much they work, how much people do, until you find people doing a lot of nitty-gritty stuff. And it really paid off. Fred was core to the parade itself. And Patrick and Mary Ann and Brad and Catherine did a fabulous job riding the parade. I'm guessing, that's not terribly important, but I'm guessing that there are probably 1,200 or 1,500 people that were there yesterday. Because in the parade itself, there's probably 450 people. 40 floats and 10, 15 people afloat.
And then all the animals.
And then, not counting the animals, yes. Probably what, 100 animals? 1,500 people, 100 animals? Whatever. On a more serious note, as everybody knows, the post office, the U.S. postal system, is looking at, or is going to move out of their current location because it's proving to be inadequate in size and access to trucks and such. None of us want them to leave town. The gentleman who is overseeing this real estate transaction, a gentleman by the name of Rick Hancock, out of Greensboro, North Carolina. I've talked with him off and on over the years. He is the fellow, along with their operating people, who will decide where prepared to move it. The alternatives simply are, you know, perhaps here in town at a location, or locations, or out on 211, and there are people on 211 who have buildings who are trying to get them to move there. There are a number of options there. He will be here at the next meeting, January 8th. He, meaning Rick Hancock, he will make a presentation as to, I believe, their process. It will be a public, obviously it's a public event, but we hope a lot of people show up. It's a public presentation by the post office. He also will be meeting with people who have already expressed interest to him with potential locations. People have reached out to Mr. Hancock. Anybody who's interested in doing that and hasn't, I have his email and phone numbers. And he is planning, and I don't know whether it's the day of the meeting or the day after the meeting, I just don't know, to check out some of the alternatives. Any observations or questions?
Alternatives that people have already made offers?
Yeah, there are.
Suggestions?
I don't know the number, but I think there is something like, I'm sort of speculating, 5, 6, 7 people who have approached him, encouraging the post office to move to their locations. One is in town, in an existing building. One is potentially in town on land. There are, from what I hear, secondhand, 3 or 4 alternatives out on 211. And so the people want it. And they're looking for a 10-year lease, 20, I think they say a 5-year lease renewable for 10. They want 10. They want it for a long period of time. They want 2,500 square feet. They currently have something like 1,800 here. The key issues everybody has heard and read. The key issue is truck accessibility. Post office has become a box handling enterprise as opposed to a mail handling enterprise. I'm exaggerating. So that's key to that. And they do not want to buy a building, and they don't want to build a building. They want to lease the building, either existing or to be built.
When is the
That's
move?
pretty much done. Pardon?
When's the move supposed to happen?
Well, it's very, to my knowledge, nobody knows. Maybe Patrick can answer, but I'll just tell you what I know. They're on a, without putting you on the spot too much, but they're on a month-to-month lease. They're going to move, but they're taking their time, seems to me, in dealing with the process and even coming here. So, at least on their side, they don't seem to be in a big rush. The landlord would like to. My sense is there is not a timetable. If Patrick, you know any different, but in talking to Hancock, it doesn't sound to me like there is.
They don't move quickly.
And any property, if they're gonna see a bear piece around, you know, how long is it gonna take a developer to get the permits, get the approvals? You know, if it's in town, you've got water, sewer, utilities. If it's out of town, you have to create all of that. So the window varies depending on where it's going to be located.
If it's a new building, it will presumably take a lot longer than it's an existing one.
As a member of the town, I think I feel it's very important that we do our best to try to keep the post office within the town. And I think one of the most powerful things that we could do is to ensure that when Mr. Hancock is here at the January 8th meeting, is to have as many people from the town here. So I want to reinforce that point that you just made.
It may make sense to try and get people to put together, you know, I think the right word.
Petition.
A petition, thank you. Thank you, Editor. A petition. One of the sensibility, or one needs to recognize the following. On the surface, they say they'd like to keep it in the actual town, what we call the town. Their bottom line metric is they want to be in the Washington zip code. So it's perfectly acceptable to them, and perhaps even some people in the county that would be quite happy to have it out on 211 somewhere. Obviously, I think obviously most people in town here would like it to stay. So I think every effort we can make, I agree with you totally. And I think we should encourage it. And I don't know, John, the reason I keep hesitating here, I do know some of the places that are interested, or the people are interested in moving there. I just don't know whether it's appropriate to sort of talk about them. In some cases, people may not want it to be known, or they may not want to start getting pressured, oh, you really got to do it in your building. So I'm hesitant to, and to be clear, we're not the ones doing the deal. I mean, we're just observers. It's not that the town has any direct involvement in this.
But the town does have some significant skin in the game. And so I guess I would go back and say, since this is the last meeting before that January meeting, do we want to send out an email blast to that electronic address group? Do you want to send out a letter to people to urge people to come to the January 8th? If they can't come to write either a letter or an email to the town council's office to, my sense is government officials are influenced as much by the amount of popular sentiment as they are by other factors. And so if we have a significant number of people here who are coming because of this particular issue, and they are given a chance to understand how important it is that they're here, I think that's, so I would suggest maybe those are some action steps that we may want to consider doing.
One of the properties on 211 is highly attractive. Or I should preface that by saying that Mr. Hancock is required by law to come.
Yes.
That's
And it will be advertised. I mean, interrupt you, but
right.
They will be advertising this hearing.
Right, but that's process. But the property, one of the properties on 211 is terribly attractive. It's paved, there's enough space, lots of parking, a wheelchair accessible. So any prospective offer in town is going to have to come up to snuff. So whoever that person is who's interested, could you speak to them and say, are you willing to step up? Are you willing to talk to Mr. Hancock and make a substantive proposal for revitalizing this building?
It's already been done. Yes is the answer.
Is there some-
And especially I hesitate, I don't know how much to get into.
Well, you don't want to
But
betray
yes,
anybody's
but
confidence.
I am talking to people for sure, I'll tell you that. I may not be the only one, but certainly I want to see it here, stay here.
Is there a way that we could convey to the person or persons in town that are interested in having it stay here or have a building?
I think that's
Could we convey as the town council or something to get it going before this guy comes here?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. think it's a very good idea. Well, are you suggesting something in writing?
And signed by all the members of the
Yeah,
town
that's
council.
fine with me, that's,
And then send it by email blast and send
yeah,
out.
how should we do that? I don't think we're gonna sit and draft something here now, unless we do. Might I suggest that you write something, you and I working together?
Yeah.
Laura's help, anybody else wants a kid, it's fine. And then we'll, if empowered by everybody, I'll sign it, we'll sign it, and get it this way.
You can get the planning commission to sign as well.
Pardon?
Maybe get the planning commission to sign as well.
Yeah, we have a meeting
Good idea.
end of this month.
I think it's important to remember that there are probably some people in the county, maybe a small fraction of people in the county that may voice some objections.
Oh, I'm sure there are, I can think of some. I can think of some stuff, and, I mean, I can understand someone living in on a zip code would just as soon go to someplace on 211 and come in. But I can also understand there might be some people who just like to see it out.
Well, I think one of the aspects of it is that the town of Washington is the county seat. And I think within the postal system, there is some merit for them to be located in the town, in the county seat of the counties that they're serving. So I think there is probably a little bit of weight that we can carry to say, keep it in the town.
Related to that, I wondered whether we should go to officials in the county government who use the post office a lot, more than any of us as individuals, and see if they would be willing to be supportive in some fashion.
On the record in
But
some way.
I'm not quite sure how to do that. But
Maybe sort of a similar action to what we're talking about as council, you know, doing something, maybe the board of supervisors would issue, you know, a statement of
A resolution.
support, a resolution of support.
I'm extremely skeptical of getting the board of supervisors to say anything on the subject.
What about Lizinski, because he's Washington's, right?
Yeah, he's
What if they just?
He's on my list.
I know, right?
and some other people, but I think the board of supervisors would.
They
I
are
wouldn't mind.
controversy.
But it certainly is more convenient for all the county offices to have it here. All right, so we'll do a letter, we'll sign it. We need someone really to work on a petition. We'll offline talk with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
since this is the last meeting before that meeting in
Right.
January, I guess a petition takes a lot of energy and a lot of work versus sending something out to people and getting people to physically come here or to write
Oh,
letters.
Oh, I agree with it. It's much more important for them to be here. Just to remind, a year or two ago, we had an issue that was brought upon us relating to town in VDOT over a street. And the transportation board held a hearing down at the VDOT. And various sides, both sides of the issue spoke. 5 people on one side, 10 people on kind of our side. And I asked the people in there, would the rest of the people raise their hand if they were in favor? And, 90% of people raised their hand, and you can see the transportation board people. Okay. Point made. The more,
So do you want to write, as well as this letter that's coming from the town council, do you want to write something that goes out to the email list and?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward.
You could use
Happy to have help.
social media too.
Happy to have help and advice with that. Anything else on that? on the agenda, and if it isn't too late now to put it on the agenda, the subject not for a decision here since it's just being raised. John Bennett, as we all know, has presented us over the last couple of months with proposals for B&B, definition of B&Bs and how we treat them in the town. And we have been, I think, kind of remiss in really focusing on it. And I think the town, the time has come for us to get focused. And the first step, as I understand it, and we can talk about it here right now, but the first step is to recommend to the planning commission that they take a look at it, and the normal process would be for the planning commission to vote on it and then pass it on to us. That presumably could be in a joint meeting or separate meetings. Defer to the planning commission as to how they would like to deal with it. I think we have one of these things where we've seen a document, but with a sort of a concentrated focus on the implications of everything is, we need to spend more time on it.
Joint meeting. Joint meeting.
If I may,
Yeah, John.
one way to go about this procedure would be to not have a formal referral to, within the meaning of the statute of these kind of matters to the planning commission, not have a formal referral to the planning commission requiring that they hold a legally advertised public hearing and make a recommendation to town council, but just an informal referral to the planning commission to receive their comments, suggestions, thoughts, whatever, on how to address the ordinance, and have those come back before the council and sort of hash through everything. And once there's a consensus as to what might be the final product, at that point, schedule a joint public hearing, which is the way we always adopted ordinances like this historically. Schedule a joint public hearing that would be legally advertised, and that is not to imply that the planning commission is going to do this in secret or anything, that there would be notice of their meetings. It just wouldn't be formally advertised as a legal public hearing, but they would, of course, be open to the public and receive public comment about whatever they were doing.
Brett, you got thoughts?
My thoughts, I'm fine with what council is proposing. I have some different thoughts, which is, I don't think there's very many people who are more willing to leap ahead than I am. But right now, with the planning commission, we are just beginning the process of looking at the zoning ordinances and aligning them into the comprehensive plan, or aligning to the new comprehensive plan. I worry about the Airbnb or this new, I don't want to use that term, but whatever is the term we're using for this document.
The way the General Assembly refers to this now is person-to-person lodging.
Person-to-person.
P2P. P2P.
I mean, we can certainly give planning commission members opinions and comments, but I think just thinking about it, that the planning commission is still very early in the process of looking at the zoning and doesn't want to, I guess would want to somehow retain the right to try to fold in this person-to-person lodging within the zoning ordinances at a later time. Because I'm not sure we'd be able to turn that around immediately, since we haven't figured out any changes that we would want to recommend to the town in zoning ordinances changes. In other words, the timing's not great for us right now. It would be, but I also recognize that for the town, making a statement or a decision on this is of utmost importance, so we'll defer to the town.
Another possibility, Mr. Mayor, would be to just leave it with council and put it on the agenda for the next meeting and have a discussion with all the interested parties.
And encourage everybody to show up.
Yep. And see if a sort of working ordinance could be adopted that could, it sounds that there's some things in transition here, but this was a heated subject in the General Assembly. The General Assembly has handed this authority to the governments, and I think it's sort of important that we exercise it.
Is there any reason to believe they're going to address it again, or have they sort of done it for the moment? Or who knows?
The nature of these things is that it was a contentious battle, and the local governments brought out their representatives, and the other side was very well funded, and I would expect that they would be back the next time the General Assembly meets. That this is not going to go away, and that to the extent that governments want to preserve any authority in this area, that number one, they should exercise it, and number two, they should let it be known to their representatives in Richmond that it is an important local topic.
Would the General Assembly, though, in its wisdom, also pass something that would basically annul any legislation that might have been done by local municipalities?
I think that's the issue, and this time Airbnb lost, but it's one of their few setbacks anywhere in the world, and I expect them to be back in full force in the next time General Assembly. Yeah, yes, they would be seeking to annul the General Assembly.
But certainly,
No, I'm not saying annul with the General Assembly. I'm saying that if the town council moves at a rapid pace and passes something with this person-to-person lodging in January, and then the General Assembly meets, the General Assembly, if they were to change the law more in favor of organizations such as Airbnb, would they not also annul whatever decisions were made by local municipalities over the past year that might thwart?
Yeah, that's always a possibility, no question about it. However, it'd be my view that speaks to the council exercising its authority rather than just letting it sit there, that having something on the books and making Richmond aware that the authority was used in some fashion would be important to preserving these authorities.
yes.
Thinking about the town itself and the potential for, clearly defined zones, given the mix of everything that's around here, I can't imagine that there would be any definitively clear zone that would prohibit or permit. It's all going to be almost one-on-one anyway. It might be useful just in terms of process for the planning commission to at least take the good work that John's already done, council has already done, give it our best shot, and then give that to council to consider while we continue with the zoning effort.
I agree with that.
That's what I would think. It's really, it's really focusing on the document for half an hour, maybe. John's put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
And, but how would that work? And the next meeting is January 8th.
We never meet
Do you have a meeting between now and then? Probably.
Yes.
29th.
Not to push it down the road, but the January 8th meeting may be rather busy.
The postal.
Yeah.
You didn't cancel that planning commission meeting? It's in the paper. That we're meeting on the
No, we couldn't.
27th and 29th.
We couldn't. So that one was, we talked about in We said we were going ahead with it.
I don't think it's been in the paper yet. What?
Yeah, it has.
But it would go in, I would be putting it in,
It was in the paper last week. No, it wasn't.
it was the ARB.
No, not the ARB.
Planning commission was in there last week.
It was. I'm confused. Because I was surprised, I missed the last meeting, I was surprised that we were meeting in December.
All right, so let's double check.
Yeah, but
Tomorrow.
I didn't.
The chair just said we are meeting.
I said the town council meeting and the ARB meeting. Okay.
So we left it how, you folks will.
We were, as of this point, we are having a meeting on December. We will put this as one of the main points of discussion and bring a recommendation back to the town council for their January meeting.
And should we, everybody / John Bennett, for the January 8th meeting, it's, I think Brad raised a good point, but would that be just a public discussion with town council and planning commission people who attend as guests, or a joint thing with them?
Could invite them for a work session
Yeah.
on the topic. Informally, whoever wanted to come and speak, would be, whatever everyone's pleasure would be on that. I think they end up having the same result, whether it's more formal or less formal. And in reviewing all this, if I may just add one little comment here, I wouldn't get hung up on real specific legalese, language or anything, but if you could just convey the concepts that we need to deal with, or the thoughts, then we can translate it into legalese at some point.
And is the topic Airbnbs or B&Bs? Is the topic Airbnbs or B&Bs?
Person to person.
Yeah.
Okay,
Airbnbs.
so it's specifically how to classify them, since we already have a definition of B&B and allowances for which zones B&Bs can live in.
Back here, let me just, I know you all have it, but let me give you copies of what.
And then I'll distribute this to the planning commission.
Okay. New business consideration of planning commission recommendations. Planning commission presented us with a very, I think, helpful and informative 4-page memo as to things that they think the comp plan, which generally we think we all would be interested. I have several thoughts on it. One is I think it would be advantageous to all of us, for all of us, to narrow down or consolidate some of these very specific ideas into some of the larger themes. And what I'm really suggesting is we come up with 3 or 4 or 5 themes or categories or subjects that we bring all of these into, because there's certainly a lot of overlap. Secondly, I really support the idea of getting as many people in our community involved in this process as possible. And then not be just something that we hear in our great wisdom decide everything. And I've spent, and I've talked with Fred about this in his role as planning commission chief, about it. And I sort of came up with some themes, and I'm going to throw out just for talking points. we're not gonna, I mean, we're not voting on anything here, it's just this conversation. And see what people think. And by theme, it seems to me if we can get a group of people who might want to be proactively involved in any one of these, I think it would be really terrific.
And by people, you mean not only people within the town, but also people who have an interest in the town, who live in the town?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, that's why, let's take advantage of the resources that are around here. And a lot of, a lot of people, I'll say what we also know, the town of Washington has 100 and some number of people. The Washington zip code has something, or the mailbox, something like 900 of them, give or take, right? Buildings, people, families that live in this zip code. Well, most of them consider they live in Washington. There's a bunch of mistaken living here as any. And then, of course, there are people who are outside the zip code who work here or care about it or what have you. To remind, we have 250 people that come to work here every day, which is a number which generally surprises people, I think. It's a real number. But many of those come from the inn, but there's a whole lot of people, it's all inclusive. Let me try out a couple kind of themes. That's not the right word. One would be infrastructure, which is pretty obvious, deals with water and sewer, roads, buildings, I suppose. But, just what is it? Just infrastructure. And identified in here, there are a number of things from painting the roof, I think that's in there, to we need a new well. We're always worried about the wastewater plant, water, I mean, all the things everybody knows. The second kind of general category, and I really lack the proper word here, so I'm not going to offer a word.
A phrase.
Most everybody would like to see more people living here. And most people have an overlapping interest and would like to see more businesses here, or the businesses that are here to thrive. And, it's almost a question of more energy or vitality or economic vitality or what have you, and whether that works its way down into assembling a group of people in the business community that get involved. They're trying to, push more tourism here. Whether it's looking at housing issues, land that we have, which is a big issue, has been discussed a lot. Those two things could be separated, but they could be separated, or they could be kind of one, just sort of energy and vitality to be sort of not really.
Town vitality.
Town vitality is really.
And that encompasses the
Yeah,
business.
that's actually the word I have here, that's sort of hesitant, sort of vitality. That could be as broad as someone wants to define it. There are another sort of category of zoning, which I think is separate, And zoning, I would suspect, also gets into issues of dealing with the town boundaries and what have you, and that's also in the vitality world. But certainly the whole issues of zoning and perhaps expanding the size of the town with property owners that want to be brought into town. Might I just add, I think I said at the last meeting, Washington Fire and Rescue Squad would like to be brought into town. They are not currently. They have septic issues, and that's something that's always sort of been casually talked about. But it seems to me that their interest and our interest, I think that most everybody's out of doing something like that, should be our priority, which then very quickly gets into the Lapham property and going down the road, and, all of a sudden becomes more complicated than just putting a pipe in a fire hydrant. But that's a possible advisory committee, if you will.
Mr. Mayor, before you go on, I would like to, if I can, just see if I can clarify, because sometimes people hear the word growth and they become very panicky. And I think what we heard through the public forums, the planning commission, what I've heard in my conversations is a planned and deliberate growth. That we are not looking to create some kind of cookie cutter subdivision or something of that ilk. But that it is something that for benefits of economies of scale, allow the services that we want to have in the town, that deliberate and planned growth would be beneficial. So I apologize for.
I don't apologize, I think it's a very good point. Whether now or at some other point on this very subject, Mr. O'Connell has voiced out interesting views as to the uniqueness of this town, and that's one of our major characteristics, and how to actually maintain that uniqueness at the same time as doing whatever one is doing.
And how fragile that is.
And how fragile it is. Do you want to talk, do you want to talk about it a little bit? I mean, it's a very valuable observation.
I think it's very difficult for most people to imagine what is not there or what they have not seen previously. So I think, curiously, each year the town becomes slightly more unique, slightly more differentiated from the rest of the world. And we see this all the time in the responses and reactions of guests, visitors, travelers. They're not just charmed, but they're astonished that such a place, they call it a bubble, a different time zone. They respond to it, they react to it. But it's very easy, if you live here, to wish to trade convenience for some of the charm, and to have services and things closer to you than weren't. So there's a struggle, I think, to find that balance. And people won't know we've lost it until we've lost it. And it is delicate enough that one really unpleasant, modern, typical convenience something or other could, destroy the uniqueness of what is here. So it's becoming unique in America. I think we would be hard pressed to find a parallel situation in another town that closely resembles this. Yet, as people used to say, when they came before the ARB, they don't want to have to live in a maintenance or have a maintenance nightmare in building their house. Well, that's one of the drawbacks of being in a historical area. Maintenance is not convenient, and maintenance is expensive. And it goes with the territory. So I think it would be helpful for people to, it seems like every time a discussion like this begins, people want this to be like any other town, and or want it to be more like other towns. So its value is that it is not like other towns, and it is not convenient, and it is a long way to go for toothpaste, or a coffee. in time. But we are managing at the moment, I think, to retain that balance. But not everyone, I think, is quite yet on board.
Well, let me just, I agree with your big point, but I differ a little bit. My sense is that people in this town are pretty much on the same wavelength. And it is true that you'll see someone say, well, I wish we had a grocery store here, or wish we had a pharmacy to pick up the drugs, or, those kind of conveniences. I'm not sure I've ever met anybody who really says, I'd like a real grocery store. I want Safeway or Giant. Or that we want a CVS. And of course, to be realistic, they're not coming here anyway, because it's too small.
At the moment.
Well, at the moment, the county's so small, there may be some point, But my point is, someone might say, I would like the convenience, but I'm not sure they really want significant change. And I've always sort of had the feeling that, and I can't speak for everybody, but I go to a lot of meetings, talk to a lot of people, that people are pretty appreciative of what we have. Though the point I really agree with is that, you can quickly go to, well, we want to be like somebody else, and I agree with you completely. I really do want to be like anybody else. And when people sometimes occasionally criticize the town and say, oh, they want to become like Aspen or Carmel or this place or that place, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, nobody wants the nice places, but nobody wants them.
Your delicate balance comes in.
It does, it does.
They're racist.
The evolution is pretty fascinating, particularly when you look at photographs of older buildings, and Laura has some astonishing examples of sort of a before and after, which would be a fabulous exhibit sometime. So when people want to turn it back to the good old days,
Maybe not.
look hard at those photos.
There were some wonderful buildings along Main Street, at least in the photos, of wonderful houses along there. Sadly got torn down
Yeah.
for whatever set of
Well,
reasons.
there was,
And replaced by things of less consequence.
yeah, well, when you remodel some of these buildings, you see that a lot of thought, care, and talent was put into them when they were built. That at some point wasn't fully appreciated. But one of the things I always do when I visit a place is, whether it's a city or a small town, is imagine it in its heyday. What it must have looked like: Detroit, Cleveland, Culpeper, when it was as grand as it ever could be. And then you try to put a year on that. Was it 1930? Was it 1940? 1890, Richmond, like the glories of the architecture there. But when you look at Little Washington, its heyday is something we're experiencing at the moment. It's now. I think it is at its moving into its zenith. We just have to keep, hopefully, all agreeing to go in that direction. And I agree with you. People, for the most part, are.
So to follow up on your good points, to ensure that charm and that we retain that, which I think is, you put very well. I think if we can articulate the vision of the town and ensure through the zoning ordinances and through other mechanisms that we retain those values, those those aspects, then is it possible that we can combine both that deliberate planned growth, not, and maintain that charm? And on top of that, I hear what you're saying about conveniences, although we do draw the line at the cup of coffee. The pharmacy, I don't need, the grocery store, the coffee, that's a point of some contention.
I'm sure Starbucks would be one of the first to be happy.
I'm not so
I think
sure. Starbucks.
if one had the equivalent of Starbucks without the name, it would be quite
Not
popular.
but I think you brought up some really good points, and part of the question is what is convenience?
Well, I think it's, a lot of intangibles are at play. But a word that I think is valuable in all of this is authenticity and a unique sense of place. So it doesn't mean you can't have some of the grittier aspects that we currently have that are authentic, that some people would like to eradicate, perhaps through over-controlling. So I think that's part of the balance. An outhouse here or there is charming.
I think authenticity is a great word.
Yes, and I think that's what America as a culture has all but destroyed.
Right.
You never know where you are, and you don't have any sense of place left. So in the hospitality industry, if you can offer that or maintain that, that's a huge part of potential success, because people are magnetized toward it. Otherwise, why go somewhere else if it's just like your town at home? The same food, the same shops, the same malls. Why go anywhere? Just hop on a plane and go to Europe.
Maybe we're sort of wandering here, but
Yeah.
I think with good purpose. We can go back to these different things in a second.
Well, I agree, and there's sort of 2 points that sort of came to mind as we're going through this. One thing that Petra said, you don't realize what you lose. And then when you look back and realize it is near impossible to return. Once you've lost it, it's gone. You can't recreate it. So it is a delicate process of how do you move forward, how do you progress. At the same time, probably not a good analogy, but you can look at Disneyland. There is a facade that you see, there's an experience you have, but literally behind it and under it is very modern, very sophisticated. But yet the experience of what you see is what you go there for. And it's not a cheap way of doing things, but if it's thought through, you can I think there is the potential to maintain this uniqueness, the character, the charm of Little Washington, some of the historical significance, but yet still allow the town to move forward, because architecture is not a static thing. It is evolving, it is cultural, it's a living, breathing thing, is what I've always said to people. Sometimes you don't agree with it, but it is part of evolution. And for us, it's how do we embrace the evolution without evolving into something that we look back and go, we really don't like what we became. And that's a delicate balance. And also, too, we were talking about the town of Washington. So some of the conveniences that we would like to see don't necessarily have to happen within the town. They can, happen on our borders, elsewhere in the county, that we as the town support and encourage. It adds to the town by their proximity, so we benefit from that without having it change the fundamental character of the town. And it's that delicate thing. We talked about that in the early stages of the planning commission review and content, thinking through some of those ideas. How do we do this? How do we keep the town without it turning into, Colonial Williamsburg, and saying, this was the only way it could be, and everybody's gonna dress in costume, and, I don't think anybody wants to be like that. But at the same time, we don't want to turn into just a suburb of DC, or a suburb of wherever. So,
Maybe what you do is you have those conveniences out on 211 instead of the post office.
yeah, you get your coffee.
That's in the post office.
Right next to the post office.
No, you leave the post office
Post
here.
office is here,
It's out there.
you gotta go out to 211 to get your coffee.
No, I think this has been,
Did you have a fourth theme?
pardon?
Did you have a fourth theme, or were those just the three?
Well, there's there's one or two others which, one could be financial, which is to say, a focus on the long-term economics of this town and our budget and revenues and such. That, we're in a pretty good spot right now, but it's always going to be a challenge. I've got a slightly different category, which is really a slightly different category, but coordinate with other governments. I guess that means the county. I think it's terribly important that we Rappahannock is too small to not have everybody possible working together. And we're in an interesting time with the county, which everybody knows about. In the past with McCarthy, he and I coordinated, well, anything I was thinking about the town, I talked to McCarthy. May not have gone the other way with regard to the county. But there's been so much, just say, change related to the county. And I go to a lot of those meetings, and I think it's just important for us to, we have as much of a stake in this county as people in this county have a stake in this town. That's like sort of a different category than some of these others. So that's some thoughts.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I had one, this is something I've brought up from time to time over the years, but I just wanted to mention again, there's a lot of compelling data now that shows the historic districts with what some would consider rigid standards results in enhanced property values. That while there is an inconvenience, there is a reward.
I think we've already realized a lot of that.
I don't see the architectural viewboard go away, or the historic district.
Now, when
You weren't suggesting that, but
no, I'm not suggesting that, but in becoming more like the convenience factor. Historic districts are the most convenient. As can be. But there's a reward for that. There's a reward for that.
I think, risk of talking too much, just that one other notion that probably fits into the vitality category. It's in the comp plan. This town, every little town in this county has its own kind of personality and strengths and weaknesses. But this town, in addition to having a government structure located here by and large, between the theaters, between the Halloween, between Christmas, the movie thing, talks, lectures, races, fodder stack, Christmas jingle bell run out of the Washington School. It's a place in which there's an awful lot of cultural, social, athletic stuff happens in this county. And I think sometimes more than one sort of thinks about it. I mean, so we have a parade, right? But we know a lot of stuff happens here. And presumably one wants to encourage that. But it's part of, that is part of the vitality, I think. And it's something that brings people to the town from the county and outside the county. Parade's a great example, or Halloween's a great example.
And people count on it. People count on these things
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah,
They love them.
so you go to that theater, the Martin Luther King's celebration, or to a movie, or to a jazz concert, is a community builder. Brings people together. Okay, I'm not sure where to, I guess I wanted to raise these things, get you all your ideas. Maybe there's a different way to organize these things. It strikes me that it would be terrific if each member of the council, it's not a requirement, but each member of the council might say, this is an area that I really would like to get involved in. Maybe get complimentary people from the planning commission, and then people who aren't on any, people at large. But a lot of folks sort of think about whether there's something you'd particularly like to,
I think one of the things that we talked about in the planning commission is having task forces or council, different committees or what have you. Certainly, one of my first experiences and once I came to town was having a chance to participate in the Avon Hall Study Group. And that was, to me, a wonderful model of bringing a diverse group of people and their thoughts together for the benefit of the town. And I think using your 5 categories would certainly, and using some kind of mechanism such as committee or task force or whatever group, whatever you want to call them, would be beneficial. The one comment that I would add is that your second category, the one that we deem town vitality, that may need several town council or 2 town council members, and there's a lot of stuff in it. There's a lot of meat.
it's a big one.
That's the big one.
There's so much overlapping.
I mean, the whole subject of housing alone, or any kind of housing growth is, in and of itself, is big.
Do you want us to volunteer today? Do you want us to deliberate on it? And
I'm open to what folks would like to do. You might want to think about it. You might, I mean, there's some natural ones. I mean, Brad is just natural infrastructure. He's expressed interest in it. I myself care very much about this as a vitality issue. But anyway, people might have, you might want to think about it. I guess what I'll go back to is I did an exercise the other day. Sounds sort of stupid in a way. Knowing that we have a vacancy on the planning commission, knowing that I was going to talk about this, I sort of came up with a list of people who now live in this town, who are on different boards, but those who are not. There are a lot of people. This place, I mean, we're not going through rapid growth here, but there are people that are moving to this town who are bringing a vitality to it, and they want to get involved. And when you start to say, well, who might go on the planning commission now that there's a vacancy, at some point you might say, well, maybe this person, maybe that person, I don't know. There's actually a lot of people. And a lot, not hundreds, a lot by our standards. And why don't, I'm not putting those, but Mary Ann, if there's something interests you, talk about now, we talk about later, after we, I don't want to put people in the spot here.
I had already, I think, the town vitality thing is, that subject is very much of interest to me. And I'd already marked down that, I think it was on, the number 6 of the original. Consider the appointment of an economic group business council, creation of a business development office. Tasked with the marketing, promotion, of business and residential opportunities in the townhouse. I'm already interested in that, so I would love to be a part of that theme.
And maybe what you do, Mr. Mayor, is you may divide that category into several.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is sort of, this is about, yeah.
Because I think most of us have an interest in that particular category.
I think that sounds great. All right, well, let's do this. Let me talk to somebody individually, everybody. Including planning commission people.
But I think also we can begin, this has been brought up in a public discussion, and that we should also encourage, by giving this skeletal basis, this gives us the beginning to talk with people we know in the community who might be interested in participating.
Well, good. I'm tempted to say, and someone who's in journalism all their life, I would hope that the newspaper might consider the discussion that we just had to be a really important as far as the town is concerned. And as an aside, I'm really delighted you guys are filming these things. I'm sick enough I've watched them, not us, but other people. But I think it serves a great purpose. And you can really get a sense of these different boards and the people and the dynamics and what have you. So it's a really good service to do. Okay, I think that is it. Open it to public forum, unless I'm missing anything. Public forum. Mr. Sarno.
I just sort of want to weigh in on a couple of general discussions. On the, first of all, I don't think the guy who's doing the post office is persuadable by petitions, and he's a bureaucrat there. It all will depend on the building and what works. But if you send out a blast email and it goes to the 900 people with the post offices there, I will bet you more than half of them would prefer to go to a post office until 11. So be careful what you ask for.
We don't have.
We know who owns some of those early number post office boxes. I believe Mr. Cox.
I'm very sensitive to that one.
But at any rate,
We don't have emails for every,
well, I know you don't, but if it gets publicized, and I'm just saying, I'm not saying don't publicize. It's going to be another day. The second is, I hope I fully endorse a broadening of committees. The Avon Hall Committee was appointed, and I do think that we need to be, when we invite people who have shown an interest to join, that it's not simply anybody who wants to step up as a part of those committees. I think that most of us want to sort of work toward the common good of the town, and so I think that's important. And I really understood what Patrick had to say and some of the responses back. I think it's important to extend the boundaries of the town because you want to control those entrances. I think we all worry, even though we know who owns the land on Warren Avenue and would probably not be open to something or other, but I think we do need to control our entrances so that it remains a beautiful way to come in. Other than those unpainted buildings. But they look very authentic. And I also think for just the economic vitality of the town, we need to have places for more houses, again, built in an appropriate manner. But I think that financially, to have stagnant growth is not good for this town. So I was just weighing in on my opinions, but some of them are pretty reflected in that document. But I'm just saying, to some extent, on the post office. And I'm not certain, I mean, I am very curious, and a question we can ask the man who comes, is the tractor trailer thing has me puzzled. And of course, we don't want a lot of tractor trailers in the town, although I don't think it would be a lot. But are they planning a much larger post office because they're going to do away with Flint Hill? I mean, talk about a tiny post office. So I'm not certain why these things are being applied to this post office when there are a couple of tiny post offices around, unless they're going to consolidate.
Well, it's a good point. I believe, said hesitantly, I've been told by Hancock they have no interest in closing any of the post office. But, that's, your point is well taken, that whatever, they're dealing with stuff throughout the whole county. And they got little post offices with coupons and this and that. They got, how they distribute stuff, what are the logistics of it are, and what are their needs, and going to be, not every one of these post offices is going to serve the same purpose, and how they sort that out. And I even asked Hancock, what about, there's this big, beautiful open space of the Amosville thing. Could that be a, basic distribution point for stuff, and then it gets divvied out to all the other places? He blew that off really quickly. But nevertheless, they got to have some concept, and hopefully when he's here, he will on his own, or we can get him to articulate what their concept is. Very good. That's to come.
Two things quickly, I know you're toward the end of the meeting, but just two observations. One is I regret that members of the Architectural Review Board, or at least some of them, were not here tonight to hear this discussion, because all of the talk about authenticity, about the sort of unique qualities of this particular place are in ordinance, in their guidelines, as maintaining the integrity of the historic district. That's their job. That's exactly what you were talking about. And I think anything that threatens the integrity of the historic district is exactly what Patrick is talking about, and all the rest of you were as well. So I'm sorry they weren't here. I hope that gets passed on to them as well, because I think, I think the comp plan, the comprehensive plan, I don't like to call it the comp plan, suggests that a member of council, if willing, would serve as an ex officio member of that Architectural Review Board, just because of its very central role in the sort of future direction of this town. That's one observation. And the second was that I like your 5 categories very much, and I hope that members of council will really think about one of those as something that they want to be the kind of center point for. Any group needs that driver. The Avon Hall group did it as well. And I think any one of those is totally dependent on the other 4. And those separate groups can't do that kind of coordination. But you can't think about the long-term future of the town without thinking about the housing, or thinking about the finances, or thinking about what kind of vitality you're going to build into here. They're all kind of interdependent no matter what. So having council as the sort of coordinating force that pulls that together, but relies on the resources, the really remarkable resources that are available in this county, and in just even this zip code, I think would be a great way to move forward. And I'm sure Judy and I are both more than willing to be on one of those things as well.
Does it make sense, if people think this has been an interesting interesting conversation that others should hear. He suggested A or B, but it strikes me it might make sense to take advantage of what Luke and his folks do. And when that video is done, the conversation we just had is between an hour, whatever, whatever time zone. And recommend to people on the planning commission, A or B, whatever, anybody who's not here, maybe friends, and when I say friends in general, people who are involved, that if they're, so that you listen to them. Wasn't all that long. And sort of picked up that idea from yours about, if the A or B people were here, well, maybe we can solve that problem. I think that might be worth doing. There's nothing to be lost, no one's got to watch it. Anything else, public forum? If not, I'm going to close it down. I'm going to suggest that we go into a closed session pursuant to the provision of section 2.2/3.71A, 711A, Code of Virginia, to discuss the named town employee. So, if everyone would be so kind to...
That's the name.
I've